I'm Jude, I'm a queer man in my mid-30s, and in an attempt to remind myself that life really actually is worth living, I've bought a house in the middle of nowhere and moved to the Scottish countryside. I'm on a really nerdy mission to raise the temperature of my compost bin, as it's pretty much stone cold at the moment. I think the problem is that it's just too dry. I'm in a really windy corner of the garden. It's really exposed, it gets really breezy, and I think it's just drying out the compost heap. So I brought the hose over, I'm going to hose it down. I've got these alfalfa cubes, which are supposed to boost the nitrogen levels in your compost. I think there's too many browns in there as well, so these will help. I'm going to soak them in water and then add them to the compost heap. Also, as a follow-up to everybody who was worried about my logs in my log store getting wet back when I built the log store because it doesn't have any cover over the front, airflow is one of the most important ways of keeping wood dry. It gets wet, it gets dry, it gets wet, it gets dry. The amount of wind in this area will be absolutely fine at keeping the logs dry. They might get a bit of surface moisture, but that's as bad as it's going to get. They'll be absolutely fine. For my fellow compost nerds, this is filtered well water, not chlorinated mains water. Everyone who knows me in real life just rolled their eyes and switched off. Thanks to everyone who said that tyres needed to be stored horizontally. I did research how to store them over the winter before I put them away, but Google does not know the difference between a tyre and a wheel. Google and I have that in common. Juggling multiple projects has meant that my shed workshop has fallen into disarray. With the weather getting colder and wetter, I wanted some inside space to work on things, like finishing my bedside tables, out of the cold, or at least in a space I could heat if I needed to.
You're witnessing the classic moment in any Jude DIY project where I realise I have made a mistake. In this case, failing to read the instructions properly. We've all been there. I decided I should test my new workspace by constructing the compost bins that have been on my to-do list for a while. Bokashi composting is an anaerobic composting process that essentially ferments your food waste, things like cooked food, meat, and dairy, that would otherwise be difficult to break down or attract pests. Once the process is complete, you can add your food waste to your compost pile as normal or bury it in the soil. It's definitely worth looking into. I've been meaning to tidy up the front of the cottage for a while, as everything is dying back and full of weeds. I'm not going to work too hard on planting up these flower beds next year because everything in them will get completely ruined when the building work eventually starts. For now, a few less weeds will do.
In this week's instalment of What's Buried on the Property, we have a giant pile of ash. This was previously covered by weeds that have since died back. And someone at some point has decided that instead of paying for rubbish to be responsibly disposed of, they've piled it up and set fire to it. Which, I mean, I would understand if some of the rubbish wasn't sheets of asbestos. You know how they say asbestos is fine unless it's damaged? If it's crumbling or something, then you need to get it disposed of. You need to walk away from it because it's the fibres that are dangerous. I have looked at pictures of burnt asbestos on Google, and what I have seen is what I have in my garden. They're really like soft looking, almost fluffy, cozy, deadly asbestos fibres. So I'm walking away from that big pile and I'm just gonna leave it where it is. I'm gonna worry about it later. It's clearly been there quite a long time, so I'm not too worried about it right now, but I am going to get someone out to do an asbestos survey. And because I know there's other asbestos on the property, and then I will pay probably an extortionate amount of money to have it removed. It's all fun and games. I would like to go back to finding tyres and rotting underpants in the undergrowth now. I've moved on from buried treasure. I've lowered my standards. Anything but asbestos will do. The idea behind that was stronger than the equipment. My dad gave me that strimmer when I bought my first house, and it was his spare strimmer. If we've learned anything over the course of these videos, it's that my father didn't own just one of anything. And it's a little bit past its best now. I don't think Bosch make those strimmers anymore, so it's gonna be fairly hard to find a replacement reel of the like nylon twine that does the actual cutting. But I've needed a new strimmer for a while. I just haven't bought one because I haven't decided whether I want a battery powered one or a petrol powered one. But I'm going to need to get one because I need to trim the bank behind my house. So that might be moving up on my shopping list because I would quite like to blend these leaves down. And at the rate I'm going, my stick blender for the kitchen would be better than the strimmer that I'm using.
I don't think anyone is watching my videos for DIY tips, but if you haven't come across reusable cable or reusable zip ties, they are so useful. I have loads of slightly dye-stained ones left over from running my yarn company, and I use them for all sorts. My main aim for this week was to make a start with my raised beds. I want to get some garlic planted in the next couple of weeks, and I also want to transplant my strawberry plants from their pots into the ground. I have enough wood for 4 8-foot by 4-foot beds, and I'm planning on putting a row of them across the bottom of the main grassy area of the garden. This area gets the sun all day, when there is sun. Just a reminder to everyone who says, Jude, I wish I had your skills. I don't actually have any skills. I have no idea why this happened, and when the same thing happened again, I gave up and used my handsaw. You'll have never seen this here before, but this is me laying things out and checking I'm on the right track before I cut the rest of the wood. I'm sure it'll still be wrong in the end, but I tried.
I just watched quite a lot of videos on how to disconnect propane regulators, and my regulator isn't like any of the ones in the video. So I think I'm going to need a spanner.
This propane tank used to supply the old cooker, which I'd replaced with an electric induction cooker as the oven was broken. I'd already turned the gas off and I just left it where it was until I had a use for it. Yakisugi is a Japanese wood preservation technique that I'm no doubt mangling, as it's my first time attempting anything like this. But you can tell I'm enjoying a project when I'm outside working on it at 8:30 in the morning. I tried several different ways of measuring the garden properly, all failed, so I decided to eyeball it, because when has that ever led anyone astray? The only time I've built raised beds previously has been on flat ground. This area isn't level in either direction, and nor is it square. After looking at it for a while, I decided it needs some further thought and planning and maybe a drawing. A job for next week. Thanks for watching. See you next weekend.